stifle dissent.
We know that when you go to your anti-war group or your environmental group, there may well be someone there, and this is right out of COINTELPRO. We did this in the 60s and 70s until there were laws against it. Congress took action. Those have been undone. But in your local group, there's going to be some really, think about that really troublesome person who's always trying to start a fight. You know, this is a tactic to send agents in who look and dress like ordinary citizens, activists, but who are there to cause trouble, to make it difficult to move forward, to break up the group, to smear people. Surveillance and infiltration, it's the way the state messes with people's minds to make them psychologically unwilling to stand up for themselves or even trust their own reality. It's a psychological pressure point and not just a tactical one.
The Bush administration says a president's warfighting powers include authority to detain enemy combatants, even when they're U.S. citizens.
The next thing is to arbitrarily detain and release citizens. And again, this is an intimidation tactic. Pinochet did it, the National Socialists did it. Do you guys remember James Yee? Chaplain James Yee, a U.S. citizen, was assigned to Guantanamo Bay. He dared to speak up against the mistreatment he saw there of the prisoners.
I raised concerns about the abuses that were occurring, how specifically religion was being used as a weapon to try and break these individuals.
And then a troubling incident occurred.
Captain James Yee was arrested after he was caught with classified documents and diagrams.
Chaplain James Yee was returning from service in Guantanamo. As he got off the plane in Florida, he was detained.
Much of what they were looking at were articles that I had printed off the internet. I had been enrolled in a master's degree program, and I was doing a research paper on the Syrian president. Almost immediately thereafter, I was then accused of being a terrorist spy and thrown in prison. I was locked away in a single solitary cell in Charleston, South Carolina, the very same facility where the U.S. government holds what they term U.S. citizen enemy combatants. I was worried that I was going to be falsely convicted of these heinous crimes and then wrongfully put to death, whether by the electric chair or some other means.
James Yee was held in solitary confinement for 76 days. But now this guy is out of prison, and every time he crosses a border, they take him and hold him and release him.
My life would be forever affected by the constant surveillance that the American government puts on its U.S. citizens.
Maher Arar, software engineer. Maher Arar, a Canadian citizen, had been vacationing with his family in Tunisia. As they were flying home, he was taken at the airport and separated from them.
I was pulled aside by immigration officials. They took my fingerprints, my photos. All of a sudden, FBI officials came and started interrogating me.
He was stopped at JFK, pulled out of line, interrogated all day, and then taken to the Metropolitan Detention Center in New York.
This father of two was held in solitary confinement for 2 weeks.
He repeatedly asks for his attorney. He tells them he'll be tortured in Syria. He tells them he doesn't want to go to Syria.
He was then taken via Jordan to Syria,
where he is detained for a year.
There was no light in there. It was 3 feet wide, 6 feet deep, and 7 feet high. It was a torture chamber.
He was whipped with an electrical cable. He was interrogated for up to 18 hours a day.
First time they beat me, I was in the chair. He showed me the cable, and he started beating me all over my body.
No one knew for the first 2 weeks in Syria where he had been removed because the U.S. government wouldn't tell people.
Maher Arar was kept in a grave-like cell and tortured for over 10 months. He was then released, and no charges were ever filed against him.
I still have fears. I don't take the plane anymore. I don't fly. I have not been able to find a job. They ruined my life. They ruined my life.
The idea that the president could simply pick up any person in the world and hold them in an offshore prison, hold them forever, is really a shock. And that goes against everything that a legal system or that a democracy or that a republic ever stood for.
Wir haben ein deutsches Theater, einen deutschen Film, eine deutsche Presse, ein deutsches Schrifttum, eine deutsche bildende Kunst und einen deutschen Rundfunk.
The next thing that always happens, the seventh step, is the targeting of key individuals. Goebbels was so good at this. He systematically targeted people who were not in alignment with the regime. So you start to see key individuals, visible individuals, kind of singled out to be punished or have repercussions, career repercussions. You saw people like the Dixie Chicks.
We're ashamed of the President of the United States.
The Chicks hit Travel and Soldier went from #1 to oblivion in 2 weeks. Replacing it, Daryl Worley's Have You Forgotten, a pro-war song.
It wasn't a local type of thing where people, and there wasn't an aspect of that, but for the most part, it was coming down from the top. You are not allowed to play the Dixie Chicks.
One random comment, they wished Bush wasn't from Texas. Next thing you know, Clear Channel, which has close ties to the White House, is making sure that radio stations are not playing their music.
We don't have a stage and a microphone. All we have is our checkbook when we go pay for the CDs and the tickets and the T-shirts and all the stuff we've paid too much money for.
And then, another one of these echoes, you hear about spontaneous CD burnings of Dixie Chicks CDs all over the South. And you know there's something funny going on with this because CDs don't burn. What does this echo? Book burnings, of course. In April of 1933, Goebbels orchestrated spontaneous book burnings where students were supposed to pile up books by people who were critical of the regime and trash them, set them on fire. You saw people like Dan Rather, a critical report of Bush's service.
CBS News, 60 Minutes, and this reporter drew fire today over our reports that raised questions about President Bush's military service record.
Subsequently, the White House put so much pressure on his employer that Dan Rather now claims in a lawsuit that his employers caved to White House pressure and drove him out of his job.
The central thing here is you can't have freedom of the press if you're going to have large, big corporations and big government intruding and intimidating in newsrooms. The chilling effect on investigative reporting is going to be something we don't want to see.
Many visible people, silent Valerie Plame.
My name and identity were carelessly and recklessly abused by senior government officials in both the White House and the State Department.
She was singled out to punish her husband, who had blown the whistle about the president's lie about yellow cake uranium.
After a CIA-sponsored trip to Africa, her husband, Joe Wilson, wrote this article attacking the rationale for war, that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Dick Cheney was furious, and when he found out Wilson's wife worked at the CIA, he wanted to use her to discredit him.
It's claimed in retaliation, Scooter Libby leaked the fact that Wilson's wife, Valerie Plame, was a CIA operative.
And you're convinced that's why they did it, is because they didn't like what you were saying?
Well, I actually think that it was more nefarious than that. I think that they were doing it because they had every intention of trying to protect the cover-up of the lies and disinformation that provided the justification for war in the first place.
They purposefully outed a CIA agent, Valerie Plame. That's not treason anymore, outing a spy? Did I mention it was one of our spies?
Did the July 14th column destroy your covert
position and your classified status?
Yes, it did.